The High Council of the Zarnathi Empire convened under the great crystal dome of the capital world, Cthulhuun, their many eyes glinting with unease. News had traveled fast. Too fast. A patrol fleet had vanished. Not damaged, not crippled. Vanished. No distress signal, no wreckage, just gone. And the last transmission chilled even the oldest of them. "It's not one of ours," the Admiral's voice had said, panicked. "By the stars, they don't have ships like that. Humans don't—" Then silence. The message was repeated over and over again on every channel. Even now, the Council played it in the background, like a cursed lullaby. High Chancellor Varkilun twisted his tendrils nervously. "There is no record," he hissed to the assembled dignitaries, "of Earth possessing this level of technology. Their last vessel class was a crude ion-warp fusion hybrid. We monitored them. They are decades behind." "Centuries," corrected Lord Chodrex, his scales paling. "Their last known fleet barely pierced mid-range systems. Their planetary economy was still dependent on combustion energy." "So what in the 9 nebulas did they fly out there?" hissed another counselor. That was the question burning through every heart in the chamber. Because whatever it was, one thing was clear. It tore through a fully armed Empire fleet like they were paper dolls. Captain Rhea Morgan stood in the dim bridge of the Ghost Light, Earth's most classified vessel. Her knuckles were white on the command rail, eyes fixed on the swirling mass of stars that wrapped around the ship's stealth shell like water. They were deep inside Zarnathi space, and not a single system knew they were there. "Status?" she asked, voice low. "No pingback from the Empire's sensors," said Lieutenant Vargas from Ops. "Cloaking field is holding. Energy signatures fully masked. We're still a ghost." Ghostlight was the pinnacle of human desperation, a last-ditch black project built in the shadows of Earth's growing fear. Aliens didn't care much about humans, until they discovered how fast Earth was learning. The Empire's sudden embargo on Terran tech imports wasn't just economic, it was fear. They didn't want humanity catching up. They didn't realize they already had. The ship itself wasn't massive. It didn't need to be. Its hull was layered with photonic crystals that bent light and masked heat. Its drive ran on a quantum-entangled gravity loop, a human breakthrough so impossible, even Earth's own scientists weren't fully sure why it worked. But it did. And in field tests, it let Ghostlight move like nothing else in the galaxy. 1 second here, next second 10 light-years away. No trail, no wake, just gone. And it was armed with weapons that shouldn't exist. "They called us backward," Rhea said softly, pacing the bridge. "And that gave us time. Time to build without their eyes watching." "Time to get mad," muttered Vargas. The Ghostlight had just returned from its first test. The mission: intercept an Empire patrol near the Raiden Rift, observe, retreat, but the patrol locked weapons, warned them to surrender. They fired first, and the humans answered with fire the galaxy had never seen. Nanite-fused rail bursts, plasma-threading lasers, a wormhole compression bomb that turned half the patrol into dark matter foam. Now there were rumors spreading through the Empire's edge colonies, ghost stories, whispers of a Terran ship that came from nowhere, struck without warning, and vanished like smoke. The Empire had faced countless rebellions, millions of species, billions of battles. But this felt different. Because for the first time, they didn't know what they were fighting. And worse, they didn't even know where the humans got the tech. Back on Cthulhuun, panic spread quietly through the highest ranks. The Empire had ruled this quadrant for over 3,000 years. No species had ever outpaced them once conquered. Earth had been under their observation since first contact, mostly ignored, mocked. Now that same planet had sent a vessel deep into their core systems, without detection, and destroyed a fleet. What if that's not their only ship? asked one of the younger counselors. That silence that followed was heavier than gravity, because none of them wanted to say what came next. What if humans had an entire fleet like that? What if they'd been preparing all along? Hea sat in her quarters, the lights dimmed to a pale amber glow. The hum of Ghostlight's quantum core was a constant, like a quiet storm beneath her feet. She didn't sleep much anymore. Not since the mission. Not since she saw the way those Zarnathi ships broke apart. Not exploded. Not scattered. Unraveled. It had been one strike, one weapon. The compression bomb had triggered a gravitational inversion that pulled the ships inside themselves like collapsing lungs. No flames, no wreckage, just silence. And yet, she didn't feel victory. She felt watched. The kind of watched that came from knowing your enemy wasn't dead. They were just quiet. Her terminal buzzed softly. A secure transmission blinked onto the screen. The face that appeared was older, lined with worry, with graying hair and eyes that had seen the darker parts of humanity. Admiral Harlan Bishop. "Captain Morgan," he said, voice low. "We have a problem." She leaned forward. "The patrol? They've declared it a terrorist act. They're blaming it on a rogue civilization, not us." Her brows furrowed. "Why hide it?" "Because they're terrified," Bishop said. "If they admit what really happened, they'll have to admit they lost control. And their entire rule is built on fear, on superiority." Rhea felt a cold knot tighten in her chest. "Then they'll come looking." "They already are," he said grimly. "We intercepted chatter on their long-range relays. They're pulling their border reavers from stasis. Haven't used them in centuries. Those things are illegal under every treaty. They wrote the treaties, Rhea. You think they care?" Meanwhile, in the outer ring of the Empire's border worlds, dread was beginning to rot the usual arrogance. On the planet Tsarka Prime, a strategic mining colony known for its obedience and wealth, local governors had begun fortifying defenses, not against pirates or rebels, but for something far worse. Rumors whispered through docking bays and cantinas like poisoned smoke. "They say the human ship can't be tracked." "My cousin's fleet was out there, gone. No signal, no wreckage, just disappeared. Maybe it's not even a ship. Maybe it's a weapon. Maybe it's not even human." This last one had caught fire. The idea that humans, long dismissed as chaotic brutes with too much emotion and too little discipline, had evolved, or been changed, enhanced, turned into something else, something even the Empire couldn't predict. On Ghostlight, the atmosphere was shifting. Lieutenant Vargas looked up from his console. "We've got movement near Vecnar Station, Zarnathi Fleet Detachment, 12 ships, old models but heavy." Rhea nodded. "Course?" "Right toward Earth's edge colonies. They're not here to talk." She turned to her crew. "Time to make our next move. We're not going to win this war by running." Engineer Zhao, quiet and intense, spoke for the first time. "You want to show them again?" Rhea nodded slowly. "No speeches, no broadcasts, just a reminder." She walked to the helm, placing her hand on the biometric pad. The ship pulsed under her touch. "Bring us to the flank. Full stealth. Weapon systems ready." It was like watching gods at war. Ghostlight appeared in orbit around Vecnar like a shadow turning into solid matter. The Zarnathi fleet barely had time to react before the first kinetic rail burst tore through their lead cruiser. No sound, no warning. Just brutal, surgical destruction. One by one, their ships blinked out of existence under Ghostlight's assault, until only one remained, spinning, powerless, comms wide open. Rhea patched in. A Zarnathi commander, bleeding from a temple wound, gasped into the feed. What are you? You're not human." She stared into the feed, expression unreadable. "Oh, we're human," she said. "You just never really looked close enough." Then she cut the line. Back on Kataluun, chaos was blooming. Admiral Verthal slammed a claw into the war room table. "This is not a rebellion. This is a goddamn ghost war. They don't engage in diplomacy. They don't leave bodies. They just strike and disappear." Another officer, younger, voice shaking. "We can't find their shipyards. We can't trace their warp signatures. They don't use conventional star routes. We don't know how they're building this tech." And then the High Chancellor, with his voice like wet stone. "What if they're not building them here?" Silence. Because that was the deepest fear of all, that humans weren't just advancing, that humans had found something out there, something ancient, something forbidden, and it was teaching them, or worse. They were evolving into something the galaxy had never seen. Deep beneath the Earth's crust, in a facility so classified it didn't officially exist, Dr. Naeem Salvi adjusted his neural sync gloves and stared at the writhing hologram above the table. It wasn't Zarnathi. It wasn't human either. It was other. The pattern pulsed with impossible symmetry, geometry that shouldn't exist in 3 dimensions. It shifted every second, alive, like it knew it was being observed. He didn't discover it. He found it. Back when Earth's deep space probes hit the edges of the Andros Veil, they picked up something strange, a cluster of dead stars orbiting nothing. No gravity well, no visible core, just absence. But then the signal came. A pulse, one that hit every quantum receiver on Earth at the same moment, even ones not pointed in that direction. A language. No, not a language. Instruction. Earth's scientists spent years trying to decode it. Salvi built ghost light from it. They weren't supposed to. But the message hadn't come with a warning. It came with an invitation. Admiral Bishop stood in the observation bay above Earth's hidden shipyard, where 2 new vessels shimmered under active stealth scaffolding. The air smelled of ozone and fear. He turned as the elevator behind him opened. Rhea stepped out, uniform crisp, eyes darker than before. "You said they're escalating," she said. "They just declared martial control over the Orion trade ring," Bishop answered. "That's 3 billion non-Zarnathi civilians under their boot." Rhea narrowed her eyes. "So they're cracking down before the panic spreads." "They're trying to, but the fear's already there. Even their own vassal species are questioning the Empire's control." "And Ghostlight?" she asked. He motioned towards the window. "It did what we needed. It proved a point." Rhea turned to face him. "Then let me take the new ones." Bishop raised a brow. "We haven't tested them." She smirked. "We didn't test Ghostlight either." That made him chuckle, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You realize what you're becoming to them, don't you?" "What's that?" "A myth. A weapon that can think. You've become their nightmare, Rhea." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. Because that was the plan all along. Back in Zarnathi space, the Empire's grip was slipping faster than they'd admit. Entire border systems had gone dark. Not from war, but fear. Trading posts emptied, colonies fled, even military installations were beginning to fracture. And always, the same stories followed in the void. A Terran ship that moved like thought. A captain who spoke only once before vanishing. And a weapon that broke the rules of physics. At the Central Archive on Lurx 5, Grand Historian Zeltar pored over ancient Empire logs, dusty with age and arrogance. He wasn't military. He didn't care for conquest. But something didn't feel right. The humans were advancing too fast. He found what he was looking for buried in a forgotten artifact registry. An anomaly discovered 5,000 years ago on a dead world. An artifact the Empire had deemed dormant and buried under classification. A cube. 6 sides, 12 points, same patterns, same shifting code. And it was exactly what Dr. Salvi had found in the Andros Veil. The humans hadn't invented this. They'd rediscovered it, and now they were using it. Ghostlight hung above a blackened moon, silent and still. No beacons, no life signs, just a single Empire listening post. Rhea stared at the surface, her thoughts clouded. "We're not here to destroy them," she muttered to herself. "No," said Vargas, "but they made that choice for us. They could have ignored us, let us grow. Instead, they tried to cage us." She nodded. "Time for another message." Within minutes, Ghostlight launched a packet, a burst transmission encoded in the Empire's own language, hacked into their long-range relay. A single phrase burned across the stars. "You were wrong about us." Back on Cthulhu, the message hit every screen, every relay, every secure military frequency. High Chancellor Varkiloon stood frozen as the words pulsed in red on the war room walls. The same message, over and over again. "You were wrong about us. You were wrong about us. You were wrong." The silence that followed felt colder than vacuum. Because for the first time in the Empire's history, they weren't feared. They were mocked. The humans had spoken, and they weren't running anymore. The Empire's core systems were no longer a monolith. Behind the shimmering towers and military parades, cracks had formed, deep ones. Fear didn't just gnaw at the edges now. It had burrowed into the bones of their civilization. On Zinara, a wealthy inner ring world known for its unshakable loyalty, protests began in hushed whispers. University students painted human sigils on walls in phosphorescent ink, symbols that glowed faintly at night before dissolving. It was treason, but it was also truth. "You were wrong about us." The phrase had gone viral across species, across systems, across cultures. Even among the subjugated races the Empire had crushed centuries ago, it was a call, a symbol, not of war, but of defiance. And the most dangerous kind of enemy the Empire had ever faced was taking shape. An idea. Captain Rhea Morgan stood inside the command deck of the Oblivion Crown, Ghostlight's younger, meaner sibling. This new ship didn't just cloak, it folded, ripped itself into the seams of space and stitched back together wherever it wanted. Its hull was etched with fractal armor born from the cube's original blueprint. Rhea still didn't fully understand how it worked. No one did. The cube had shown them. Not told, not explained, just shown. Zhao stood beside her, arms crossed. "Ghostlight was stealth. This one's a damn message." "That's the point," Rhea replied. "We're bait now? Number we're the storm." And they're about to feel the first wind. In the Empire's Senate chamber, chaos was a quiet affair. Votes were cast faster than debates could be held. Systems were granted emergency military lockdown without oversight. Entire planets were cordoned off on suspicion of Terran infection, as if ideas could be quarantined like disease. Lord Chodrex pounded his clawed fist onto the floor. "We are reacting like prey," he snapped, "to a primitive world." But no one replied. Because now, no one believed that anymore. A junior senator, barely old enough to shed his ceremonial feathers, stood up with trembling limbs. "What if they've found the Makers?" The chamber fell into dead silence. It was forbidden to speak of them, the ancient ones, the species lost to time, the source of so many scattered ruins and forbidden relics, like the cube the humans had found. The Empire's official position was denial, but every elder in the room knew the truth. The Makers had left something behind. And maybe, just maybe, the humans had been chosen to inherit it. Back in Sol space, Admiral Bishop received the latest intercepted transmission from deep inside the Empire. His analysts stared at the contents, pale and quiet. He read it twice before muttering, "They're scared." "Of Ghostlight?" one officer asked. "No," Bishop said. "Of what we might become." He opened a new priority file, keyed in a secure code, and titled the operation, Inheritance Protocol. It was time to escalate, not with destruction, but with proof. If humanity could strike fear, they could also inspire. In the colonies near the rim, something beautiful and dangerous began to grow. A multi-species rebellion, Zarnathi dissidents, reptilian slaves from the Drotan mines, the aquatic Kelith from the drowned cities, all of them united not under a flag, but a sentence. You were wrong about us. They had seen the Terran ships, not just Ghostlight or Oblivion Crown. There were more now, smaller, faster, leaking into every corner of the Empire's hold. Sometimes they attacked, sometimes they only watched. But they were always there, and their silence screamed louder than the Empire's banners. On board Oblivion Crown, Rhea received a private comm burst from Dr. Salvi himself. No face, just his voice. "The cube's map just expanded," he said, excitement barely restrained. "There are more sites, scattered across the galaxy, some in Empire space." She leaned forward. "What kind of sites?" "Like the one we found in the Veil. Dormant, locked, waiting." Her fingers curled into fists. If the Empire found them first. "Send coordinates to Bishop," she said. "We move tonight." "And if they try to stop us?" Rhea's voice was calm. "Then they'll see the part of us they really should have feared." The planet's name had been forgotten by the galaxy, scrubbed clean from maps and archives. The Empire called it Sector W09, just a number behind a warning beacon and a "Do Not Approach" tag burned into official records. But buried beneath its volcanic surface was something older than Zarnathi history itself. And now humanity was here to claim it. Oblivion Crown dropped out of fold space in total silence. No ripple, no trace. It hovered in low orbit like a phantom, scanning the mountain ranges below for the buried signal Salvi had traced from the cube's latest pulse. "Got it," Zhao announced, eyes wide. "Trilat pulse buried under 300 meters of obsidian. Same frequency as the Veil cube, almost calling to us." "Landing team, gear up," Rhea ordered. The crew moved with practiced efficiency. No wasted motion, no doubt. They knew what this mission was. Not just exploration, validation. If the Empire found the site first, they'd destroy it, bury the evidence like they'd done before. But if humanity reached it, the galaxy would know the truth. The Terrans hadn't stolen power. They were the rightful heirs. Down on the surface, the air was acidic, thick with ash. Their suits filtered most of it, but it still clung to their skin like guilt. They trekked down into a canyon split wide by ancient seismic upheaval, flashlights flickering against jagged walls. And then they saw it. A doorway, etched into the rock like it had always been there. Not Zarnathi, not human. Older. The markings glowed faintly as Rhea approached, her hand brushing against one. The door didn't open. It recognized her. With a soft vibration that hummed through the soles of their boots, the wall melted backward like liquid glass, revealing a tunnel of black stone laced with silver veins. Inside was silence. Not the absence of sound, the presence of something watching. On Cthulhuan, alarms screamed through the central command towers. The Empire had picked up a subspace pulse, an echo, originating from Sector W09. They knew what it meant. Someone had activated the tomb. Admiral Verthal cursed under his breath. "Send a fleet, immediate launch, nothing in or out." Lord Chodrex narrowed his eyes. "If the humans open it, we won't be able to deny it anymore." "They won't live long enough to tell anyone," Verthal growled. But in his gut, he knew. It was already too late. Inside the ruin, the air grew warmer, charged. Salvi's voice came through the comms, whispering in awe. "It's an archive," he breathed. "Look at the walls. They're alive." Rhea turned slowly, staring at the flowing patterns etched into the stone. They moved like rivers, spiraling and shifting in perfect sequence, like language, like memory. In the chamber's center stood a pedestal, and hovering just above it, a cube. Not identical to the first. This one shimmered gold instead of blue, but the design was unmistakable. Zhao stepped forward, carefully raising the containment field. "Wait," Rhea said softly. The moment she spoke, the cube pulsed, and then her neural comms lit up with a flood of data, not words, not images, feelings, fear, survival, rage, hope. And then a question, echoing deep in her brain like it came from inside her own thoughts. "Are you ready to finish what we started?" She stepped closer, heart pounding. "We don't even know what that is." The response came instantly. "Then you are ready." The cube sank into her hand like light wrapping around bone. The ruin shook. The walls blazed with light. They hadn't just found technology. They had triggered a wake-up call. In orbit, Oblivion Crown detected incoming threats, 12 Zarnathi destroyers, emerging from fold space in tight formation. "They're here," Vargas said, fingers flying across controls. "Engines hot, shields charging." "Time to go loud," Rhea replied, emerging onto the bridge in her exosuit, the golden cube tucked under her arm. Her voice was steady, her eyes gleaming with something new, something old. Vargas blinked. "Are you glowing?" She just smiled. "Target lead ship. Fire the arc array." Ghostlight had been a scalpel. Oblivion Crown was a sledgehammer. The first beam carved a hole straight through 2 cruisers before they had time to blink. The Zarnathi formation scattered, scrambling to adapt. But Rhea was already ahead. She moved the ship like she was thinking through it, like it was part of her. Zhao looked up from the systems panel, eyes wide. "The cube, it's syncing with the ship." "No," she said, her voice distant. "The ship's syncing with me." From his command chair back on Earth, Admiral Bishop watched the live feed. He saw the ships vanish under Oblivion Crown's fire, saw Rhea move like a god among stars, saw the second cube pulsing in her hand. Then the comm feed lit up again, from Salvi. "Sir," he said, breathless. "I was wrong. There aren't a few sites." Bishop leaned forward. "How many?" Salvi swallowed. "Dozens, no hundreds, all across the galaxy, buried, sleeping. And now? They're waking up." News spread like plasma fire across the stars, silent, fast, and impossible to contain. Entire star systems picked up the subspace wave emitted from the second cube. A resonance not just felt by sensors, but heard in the minds of anyone near it. A kind of psychic chord that stirred something primal in the oldest species. Not fear, not awe, recognition. The galaxy began to realize the horrifying truth. The Empire hadn't built civilization. They were squatting in the ruins of something much older. And now, that something was waking up again. And the ones awakening it were human. On Cthulhu, the Empire's panic mutated into paranoia. Every ambassador, every counselor, every loyalist vassal interrogated. Loyalty screenings were conducted with invasive psionic probes. Dozens were executed on suspicion of Terran influence, though not a single one had ever seen Earth. It didn't matter. The Zarnathi High Command no longer cared about truth. They cared about control. But they couldn't stop the whispers. Not anymore. Because now, even their own people had started asking the forbidden question. What if the humans were chosen? Rhea sat in the command chair of Oblivion Crown, the cube glowing gently beside her. She hadn't slept in 2 days. didn't need to. Since touching the artifact, her mind was sharper, focused. Her thoughts moved faster, her memory burned brighter. Her dreams? No longer hers. She'd started seeing things, visions that didn't belong to her, cities carved from living metal, machines with skin, stars being birthed, manipulated, designed. Not dreams, memories. Not just from the cube, from the makers. They weren't just engineers. They were architects of reality. And they had vanished not because of war, but because they had passed on a legacy, a dangerous one, a test. And now Rhea could feel it. She was the key. In the Drotan wastes, a slave species long assumed docile began rising. Quietly, at first. Shipyard workers refused to load Zarnathi carriers. Pilots rerouted shipments to unknown locations. And then, on the mining moon Varesh 6, an entire garrison surrendered to a rumor. "They say she walks between light," one soldier whispered. "She moves like the wind, strikes like the dark. She's not just human, she's what comes after." And everywhere the rebellion bloomed, the same message was painted in ash, carved into metal, etched in blood. "You were wrong about us." Dr. Naeem Salvi stood before a massive hollow map inside the Earthside Maker archive, staring at the sheer scale of the cube network. 211 sites confirmed, he told Bishop through a secure link. 29 already showing signs of activation. It's cascading. We triggered something far bigger than just knowledge. Bishop leaned in. "Explain." "These cubes, they're like keys, but not for weapons." "Then for what?" Salvi turned. "For evolution?" There was a pause. "You're saying the makers weren't just teaching us tech?" "No," Salvi said. "They were preparing us to replace them." Onboard Oblivion Crown, alarms lit up. "Fold breach! Rear quadrant!" Vargas shouted. "Zarnathi Interceptor Fleet, 25 ships, all advanced stealth grade." "They're not running this time," Zhao muttered. "They're here to finish it." Rhea stood, her hand resting on the cube. She didn't reach for weapons. Instead, she opened a channel. To everyone. Empire, allies, rebels, and unaligned systems alike. The screen crackled, then lit up with her face. Calm, human, glowing with a subtle light from within. "My name is Captain Rhea Morgan," she said. "I pilot the Oblivion Crown. I serve no empire, no throne, no ancient war." She paused, letting her voice settle like thunder. "I serve the future." The cube pulsed, sending ripples across every ship in the system. "You feared us because we were unpredictable, chaotic, fast. But that's why the makers chose us. Because we grow, because we adapt, because we don't stop." Zarnathi ships hesitated, weapons held, unsure. "And if you try to erase what we are, if you think fear will cage us again," Rhea's eyes hardened, "then come see what happens when humanity evolves." On Catalun, the High Chancellor watched the transmission in silence. And for the first time, he didn't feel rage. He felt something worse. Obsolescence. Because in that moment, watching the human woman speak like fire through the cold void of space. He realized something the Empire had refused to admit for 1,000 years. They were no longer the future. They were the past. The Zarnathi fleet hung in space, weapons charged, engines humming with power, but none of them moved. Captain Rhea Morgan's message still echoed across the system, across channels thought to be private, encrypted, invisible. Now every Zarnathi pilot, every command deck officer, every political envoy had heard the truth. And the silence that followed wasn't just confusion, it was hesitation. Then the feed cut, and Oblivion Crown dimmed, its hull absorbing starlight, vanishing like a shadow blinking out. The fleet scrambled. No one knew where she went. No one ever did. But one thing was now carved into their minds. The humans were not running. They were leading. Admiral Verthal slammed his clawed hand onto the war table, sensors flickering and zooming across the system feed. "They had us in range," he spat. "They could have struck again." "They didn't need to," muttered General Keelar. "They showed us they could. That's worse." "And the soldiers," Verthal hissed, his voice cracking. "I want charges filed against any commander who hesitated." "No," came the Chancellor's voice, low and brittle. "Let them go." Verthal's eyes widened. "What?" The High Chancellor stood from his dark throne, bones slow, breath shallow. "It's over, Admiral. We are no longer the center of this galaxy." "Then what do we do?" Verthal whispered. The Chancellor looked out into the void, voice barely audible. "We survive it." In the shadows between stars, Ghostlight re-emerged, silent, spectral, and sharper than ever. Its systems had evolved, connected now to the cube network like a neuron in a greater brain. The ship was no longer bound by thrusters or engines. It drifted between folds of time and matter like a ripple through fabric. Rhea had sent it on a mission. It wasn't to attack. It was to awaken. And on over 20 maker sites across the galaxy, Ghostlight arrived like a whisper, igniting dormant cores, unlocking libraries of knowledge buried beneath rock and ice and forgotten cities. In its wake, silence was broken, and the stars began to sing. Back on Earth, Salvi stared at his latest readings, his heart pounding like a drum. "They're responding," he said aloud. "All of them. The cubes are sinking, not just to us, to each other." Bishop leaned in. "What does that mean?" Salvi looked up, eyes wide. "We're not just activating tech anymore. We're bringing a network back online. A civilization-wide lattice, possibly sentient, possibly alive." "You're saying the makers are waking up?" "No," Salvi said slowly. "I think we are the makers." Bishop's breath caught. "What?" "The designs, the DNA alignments, the neural resonance in Rhea. She's not just syncing with the cube is syncing with her." He stepped back from the holomap, hand shaking. The makers didn't disappear. They became us. On a dead world at the edge of the Andromeda Breach, a storm of ash swept across a blackened city made of metal and bone. And beneath it, something stirred. A construct buried deep inside the planet's core activated for the first time in 10,000 years. Its heart glowed with the same golden light now carried by the Terran ships. It began to hum. The melody carried into space, reaching out across the void like a call home. Rhea stood inside the Maker Chamber, this time on a new world. Aurelia, once considered barren, now revealed to be a vault. The chamber reacted before she even spoke. Walls split open like petals. Holograms bloomed into patterns, languages layered upon languages, and in the center, a final message appeared. Not from the cubes, not from the past, but from herself. A mirrored projection, her own face, but older, stronger, colder, and it said only 3 words. "You were warned." The cube in her hand pulsed violently. Zhao flinched. "Rhea, what the hell is that?" She stared into the hologram, and the truth hit her like a warship. "These weren't just gifts," she whispered. "These were tests." She looked around the chamber, the shifting walls, the glowing pillars. Not every civilization passed. Far away, in the heart of Zarnathi space, their last gambit was unfolding. A hidden vault, sealed even from their own commanders, was being unearthed. Project Dreadmother, a weapon built in secret designed after the Empire first discovered fragments of Maker tech long ago. They'd failed to replicate it, but they twisted it, engineered it into something unstable, something horrifying. And now, in a final act of desperation, they would unleash it. "They think they're the Makers reborn?" Verthal hissed. Then let them meet what we made in their image. Behind layers of plasma shields and failsafes, something screamed awake. Half machine, half maker, all rage. The stars were too quiet. From the edge of the Andros Veil to the burning rings of Calthera Prime, ships stood still, Empire, Rebel, Terran, not firing, not retreating, just watching. Because something new had entered the void. Something wrong. Dreadmother, a creation that never should have existed. Not built, but cobbled together from stolen maker fragments and Zarnathi ambition, merged with organic material, bred in a tank of fear. It wasn't a ship. It was a being. Its hull was alive, stretched over bone and steel, twitching with electrical spasms. Weapons grew from it like tumors, pulsing, leaking radiation. It had no bridge, no crew. It was the crew, and it had one purpose: eradicate anything that bore the spark of the Makers. Inside Oblivion Crown, Rhea stared at the incoming mass on the sensor array, her chest tight. "It's not just big," Zhao whispered. "It's loud." The sound wasn't noise. It was pressure. It vibrated inside their skulls, scraping against their thoughts like claws on glass. "Biometric scans off the charts," Vargas added. "It's broadcasting hate like it's a damn war chant." And then it spoke, not in words, in memory, 1,000 screams, 1,000 species wiped out in Empire conquests, executions, chemical cleansing, entire moons glassed and forgotten. It fed on pain. It was born of pain, and it wanted to end them, all of them. Back on Earth, Salvi's team watched as the Maker lattice began to shudder. The cubes across the galaxy pulsed erratically, like they were in distress. "It's disrupting the network," Salvi said, voice rising. "Like a virus, a false echo." Bishop leaned over the console. "Can we stop it?" Salvi hesitated. Number, but she might. Rhea opened the cube in her hand. Not physically, mentally. She reached into it like it was an extension of herself. And the cube reached back. The chamber around her flickered, then collapsed into light. She stood alone, suspended in nothing. No ship, no suit, just stars and silence. Then another figure appeared. Her reflection again, but clearer now, older, wiser, not just a version of Rhea, the first Rhea, the original, the one who had failed. "I see you've come further than I did," the reflection said. "But this is where we always fall." "No," Rhea said quietly. "Not this time." "You think you're different?" "I'm not here to be different," she said. "I'm here to finish it." The reflection smiled and vanished. And Rhea woke up, eyes glowing, pulse steady. She was ready. Dreadmother fired first. A blast of pure entropy ripped toward Oblivion Crown like a tidal wave of death, curving space behind it. Any normal ship would have been torn apart, atoms undone. But Rhea was the ship now. She moved with thought. The blast missed. Then she struck back, not with cannons, with resonance. The Maker lattice behind her shimmered, every cube, every ruin, every site connected to her pulse. They began to hum in unison. A single note, soft and pure, swept through the system like a siren's cry. The Zarnathi fled first, then the rebels. Only Oblivion Crown and the Dreadmother remained, gods locked in orbit. The crown's wings unfolded, light flowing from every fractal ridge. And Rhea whispered to the stars, "I am not your mistake. I am your echo." The final strike didn't look like fire. It looked like stillness, Oblivion Crown folded into the Dreadmother's shadow, piercing its core, not to destroy, but to rewrite. The Maker code flooded through it like a soul forced into a body that didn't want it. And the Dreadmother screamed. Rage twisted into agony, agony into clarity. For a brief moment it saw itself, what it was, what they'd done to it. And in that instant, it chose something it had never known: peace. Then it shattered into dust and stardust, atoms blooming like a nova. Silence returned. The Empire's last weapon gone, its fleet scattered, its citizens no longer afraid of the shadows. And across the galaxy, new symbols began to rise, not flags, not borders, but cubes, lit in blue and gold. And at the center of them all, in the heart of the Maker lattice, stood Rhea, human, more. A final message was sent to every species, every system, encrypted not in code, but in emotion, in resonance. It needed no translation. We were never lesser, we were never late, we were always becoming. You were wrong about us, but now you have a choice: stand with us, or be left behind. In the dark halls of the broken empire, someone whispered, "They weren't supposed to win." And someone else replied, "They didn't win." They became.